Yeah, I mean, can I add in that sitting next to a young graphic designer last week, she was saying that how there is a great enthusiasm amongst graphic designers to use paper, and then they find they go out into industry and into marketing companies and agencies and find that they're forced to work in electronic media rather than on paper. They want to use paper and want to use paper in innovative ways and create new products because the technology now allows you to create new products. You don't have to create commodity products. They want to explore those uses, that tangibility, that empathy, to borrow the word we came up with earlier. But they're being pushed in that direction by, again, the previous generation who wants them to use electronics because electronics for whatever reason. So perhaps there's a groundswell somewhere.
Yeah, a backlash.
Well, yeah, but as I say, it's when paper is appropriate, when it's relevant. Whichever technology you use has to be relevant for the purpose that you use it for.
Sure.
And that's what's going to win out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, may I?
Yeah, go for it.
So, I kind of feel like, don't get me wrong, my house is lined with books. I read newspapers, I read magazines. That's not the question. And so I feel like, Martin, it sounds like Two Sides is actually a straw man, like based on a straw man argument in its entirety, saying that we should have no more paper. No one has actually suggested that. I mean, okay, maybe there are a few radical people out there who say we should never use any paper. I don't know those people, and I work on this issue quite a lot. What we say is there's useful uses of paper, and then we have wasteful uses of paper. We actually made a graph with Bill. I'm sorry, his name is not coming to me. Bill from Paperlinks. Bob. Yes. We actually sat down with some Paperlinks folks in their office just as an experiment, and we came up with a what did we call it? Paper utility scale, where we put utility on one end and volume on the other, and way up on one side, high utility and low volume, you have your passport or your birth certificate, and way down here you have catalogs that only 2% or 2.5% of the people actually buy something out of, huge volumes and low utility. So we totally, respect the idea of using paper, and but we have a lot of wasteful uses of it, and we should try to get rid of those. Or that's all.
I think one of the other statistics that came out of the survey was that still 75% of the population believe somehow that the paper industry is responsible for deforestation, tropical deforestation and deforestation.
Have you been to Sumatra?
Yeah, but that's a European. We asked the question
but
about
the paper is sold here.
We asked the question about the European forestry and is it growing or is it diminishing? And they say it's diminishing. In fact, it's growing. There is a misunderstanding that we've allowed some really bad situations to impact on the general belief about our industry. And that's what we've got to try and get that balance back right. Not everything about it is great. There are some issues which we've got to address. But actually, there's a large percentage of our industry that's just really good. We look after the forest. We're actually responsible for a very small part of the forest use. The public don't understand that. Our job, as I see it, is not to over-exaggerate. Just try to put the record straight.
Great stuff. We've got to have a question coming in here.
Yes, I've been waiting a while, but okay. Thank you very much. My name is Tommy Wikstrand, working for Holmen Paper, and we are mainly working with new fibers, as I call them. And you have not mentioned the difference between recycled, because my feeling is that the support is more and more for recycled fibers, but as you said earlier during the day, it will be, I think, 3 times that it's out of business fiber, because due to waste and etc. And the support of FSC Recycle, for example, how does it fit in? Also support with another organization that is more and more recycled based. And we, Holmen, as a new fiber supplier, we wonder, of course, how should we see this from certifications and etc.
Did you get that? Did you?
I think so. What's the role for virgin fiber? I'm sorry, just what's the...
My feeling is that it's more and more supportive. There's more and more support about you have recycled in everything. It should be recycled per content to that level. It should be recycled in that content. Otherwise, you're not fulfilled. There's different certificates and etc. etc. And then on top of this, this FSC recycled also come on this, and that's of course we see this. We have a limited volume of FSC paper that we can sell. But everyone that use 100% waste paper, they can sell 100% FSC recycled. So then we have a problem.
Right. Well, you said you're from Sweden, correct? Yes. Well, I mean, the first thing to do is to get the Swedish Forest Owners Association to go FSC, and then you'll have a lot more available fiber.
Main part of Swedish forest owners are very small farmers and cannot afford it.
But as a group, they could afford it. Yeah, I'm sure they could. I mean, they can afford to do PEFC.
But not talking about PFC. I just wonder how do we support this new fiber situation, because we will be running out of fibers to all the waste paper mill otherwise also within short also. It's two-part in my question. How do the industry see upon recycled fibers versus virgin fibers? How can we support the virgin fibers usage?
That was actually going to be one of our questions. I mean, what does the panel feel about the environmentally friendliness of recycled paper as opposed to virgin, which actually, when you really analyse it, you know, is it that environmentally friendly to use recycled paper? Is it? Because of all the de-inking that goes on, because of all the transportation, the recovery. There's a debate. What do you think?
Yeah, the simplest questions are the most difficult answers. To be quite honest, it's a bit like sort of saying, what's more important in your diet, protein or carbohydrate? It's a bit of a ridiculous question, really. It depends whether do you want to read a book or ride a bike, what are you going to do? And it's pretty much like that with paper. It's appropriate use for the appropriate application. And far from being a debate or an argument about one or the other, the simple fact is you cannot have one without the other. You can only have 100% recycled mill because somebody else somewhere else is putting virgin fibre into that mix. Yeah. And so you can have somebody over this side of the room buying 100% recycled product. Is that product sustainable? No, not necessarily. You could have somebody over here buying 100% virgin product. Is it sustainable? No, not necessarily. They're only sustainable because each other exists. And you have to have both in balance, but for the most appropriate use for that mix of fibre.
I mean, you know, as a basic matter of fact, recycled paper, to make a ton of recycled paper or a ton of virgin, to make a ton of recycled uses less water, uses less energy, uses less inputs, etc. And when you do the de-inking, you get a great thing actually, because so many of the recycle mills I've gone to visit or worked with are taking that, you know, it takes like 1.3, 1.2, 1.4 tons of input to make a ton of paper out the other end, and they're taking a very considerable portion of that 0.2 to 0.4%, and that gets recycled into fertilizer for fields. Some use it actually to make bricks, you know, burn, you know, to add to bricks, and it makes them very have excellent insulation properties. But anyway, I mean, that's a matter of fact. That's not for debate. Now there is, of course, it does require some new virgin inputs. Virgin, though, is only going to be seen as being recycled when the paper industry and you know acts more responsibly on the ground, which is why we titled our report "On the Ground," because there are so many examples. You can go to places and see bad practices on the ground, and it happens in Europe. As I said, it happens all over the world, and that's a liability for the industry. And once you clean that up, then you're going to have a better image.
That actually goes back to my point about generalisation. I remember I started my career working at Shotton Paper Company, which actually started its career as a 100% virgin fibre mill making newsprint. It now happens to be 100% recycled fibre, and it's gone down from something like 3 megawatt hours per tonne to produce a tonne of newsprint down to less than 0.8 because it's gone 100% recycled. Okay, so far so good, agrees with the fact that recycle uses less energy. Well, yes and no, because by heavily promoting that when I was working at mill, I actually shot myself in the foot, because that only applies to that product and that use and that type of fibre. It does not apply to other types of fibre. You can't generalise about mechanical pulping and apply that to chemical and wood-free pulping because it doesn't fit.